to a stark warning from one of NATO's most senior officials. General Sir Tim Radford says that Britain is only just holding on to its influence in the organisation because our army is now too small. I think it's fantastic, isn't it, that we did all these diversity recruitment drives? That worked a treat, didn't it? Defence Secretary Ben Wallace said last year that the UK needed a bigger army. At the moment, we only have 76,000 troops. That is a fall of 21,000 in the last 10 years. Joining me now is the former head of counter-terrorism. It's Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, what's going on? Is the army not an attractive place for people to work, or are we making silly cuts?
Well, both of those are true at the same time, really, at the moment, Patrick. So, firstly, this week we had a report by a chap called Haythornthwaite about the review of armed forces incentivisation. That showed force deficits across the piece, where from October 21 to September 22, there was a 30% reduction in those coming forward to join the regular forces, with a 17% increase in outflow, resulting in a reduction of 4,250 regular personnel. So you have a problem at the front end with recruiting and retention. At the same time, you have a Defence Command paper about to come out. It's going to be delayed because of the Vilnius meeting in NATO, which is going to at least cut us to 72,500. And last month, there was a sort of straw man, a paper to sort of flag things up to see what people made of it, that made the notion that we would be going down to 60,000. Now, sometimes they do that so that if we end up with 64 or 68, people say it wasn't as bad as it could be. But it's looking pretty stark on both inflow, outflow and total numbers that we'll be going to for the future for the Army. But it's worth saying that the RAF and the Navy are far more important in vital interests for the UK than the Army.
OK. I think what is also important to note is that our military can't go on strike in the way that hospital consultants who are on probably around 5 times their salary can if they choose to go on strike. And therefore, they have very little leverage when it comes to things like pay and conditions. I mean, the mind boggles, really, doesn't it? We seem to have had these bizarre recruitment drives that are targeting, as much diversity as possible. Even serious talk about the RAF deliberately not processing and passing through people because they didn't have enough diverse recruits. And then now we end up in a situation where the army feels underpaid and undervalued, struggling to get people on board, and it's being cut. I mean, the first job of any government is to protect its citizens, isn't it? And we're just depleting our own military.
Yeah, that's true. And I think there are 2 points relevant to that. The first one is that we become more willing to sign up for what we call military aid to the civil authority task that is, stepping in for all those who are on strike, be it the border force or ambulance workers. And often, of course, the people who are stepping in to do that are paid less. The second thing, of course, is that we do have to look at what the armed forces pay review bodies come out with. They set the parameters for what will be the award in subsequent years. But one thing that there's no appetite for a current government or any government to do is build back to Cold War forces. And there is still this notion that technology will overcome the former mass. Now, I'm pretty sceptical about that, as Tim Radford's boss, General Cavoli, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe, is, when he sort of said the scale of the war in Ukraine is out of sync with our recent thinking and experience. So, mass can matter, precision can be brilliant, and it can beat mass, but you need a lot of it, and that's also very expensive.
Every time I listen to the radio, there is an advert for a recruitment drive for the army. And what that says is, nothing can replace a soldier. Nothing can do what a soldier can do. So if they have got this belief behind the scenes that, it's all right, AI and technology will step in, that is actually the opposite of what their recruitment drive is telling people, which is that only human beings can do it. But the reality is that they're not really after that many human beings. In fact, they want fewer of them. They're not going to pay them that well or treat them that well. And we, as a result, are just clinging on to NATO relevance at the time that the world is at its most freebrow.
Yeah, I think you always have to be careful of any organisation that says that people come first when they don't sort of either reward them properly or treat them well. But of course, you need a sort of marry-up between technology and people. You need technologists who can operate people. The days where artificial intelligence and strategic autonomy to launch weapons, we're light years away from that. That's just not going to happen. But you need smart operators for the high technological things. But at the end of the day, war is still a bloody affair, and the nature of war hasn't changed. You need people who can go on the ground and hold ground and take ground if you need it. That's what an army is for. But it's also relevant probably for the NATO forthcoming Vilnius thing, that may alter where we fight, because where you fight sort of helps to posit where your equipment might be. So it might be that we're given a new role, which is to go to the high north and the sort of Arctic and Norway, and that will be the expertise for British forces alongside the RAF and the Royal Navy, protecting both the airspace of NATO and the North Atlantic.
Major General, thank you very much. Major General Chip Chapman there, the former head of counter-terrorism, reacting to the fact that our army is shock horror too small. Well, it's a shame, because we've been cutting away at it for a very long period of time. We treat people in our armed forces much worse than we actually treat people who are out there in force on strike, like train drivers and junior doctors and all of this stuff. They're, of course, not allowed to strike people in our armed forces. And then on top of that, when they come out of the armed forces and they might have a mental health issue or something like that, we treat them like dirt again. So it's not really a shock, is it? But there we go.